Hey, everybody. Welcome to Plant a Good Seed podcast. And there's Jay.
Hey, how's it going?
Awesome. Great to see you, man.
You too. You too. Can't wait to hear about your adventure.
I know, right? Well, let's talk a little bit about how we met, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Well, so we were both at Office Evolution associated there. And I know I saw your business card. And then I think it was at the Cary Chamber of Commerce event. I walked by and like your booth was like total zen, and you had these cool cards and you hand me a little stress ball. And then as we got talking, my wife being a massage therapist and what you do, certainly we just had a lot in common, but you just had such a great spirit and energy and positivity that it was amazing. And then you showed up at Office Evolution and taught us how to relax ourselves, give some relaxing exercises and things you can do when you're sitting there in your office and working and just keeping yourself healthy, both in mind, spirit, and body, and not just sit there and be a workaholic all day long, but take a moment to think of yourself, right? So you're just such an amazing person and energy. So it's just, I think, just been a great friendship since.
It has. And I mean, even at the Cary Chamber, it's funny, I met a lot of people, but not a whole lot of people stuck in my head. But I remember you and your partner, you guys were like open. You know how some people, you meet people and you're just like, okay, as they go down the road, even though they're talking to you like they want to get to know you, but they don't, they don't really want to hear what you have to say. They just want to hear themselves talk and see your reaction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you guys were totally different. You guys were just like open. Ooh, almost like feed me. What you got here? So it was, and then when I still don't know a whole lot about your company. Do you want to tell us just a real quick about about your company a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I have a background both in the military and corporate America as a leader, and my passion through those years was taking teams and turning them around, and that's something I was really known for. And I did that through culture, through diversity and inclusion, through employee engagement. And I have a background in behavior science, so I use a little bit of that. And I decided that I wanted to follow what I woke up to do every day, and it excited me. And so I left a phenomenal job in corporate America and decided to start Pathfinder Business Consultants. And that's been our focus. I've been in business now for a little over a year and a half and just growing exponentially. I have a great team. And, certainly now with everything that's going on, I have to admit I was a little disheartened when I first started. Diversity is a key point of organizational change for me and excellence. And people wouldn't hone in on that. They were always going to, but Jay, help me turn my team around and help me with strategy. And so, I just, in my heart, I was like, oh, this is getting pushed to the side. But with everything that's been going on, in the national dialogue and our culture, all of a sudden, people are wanting to hear and realizing that, hey, we have an opportunity to be better. And so that business is now, in the forefront, and just been amazing having conversations with people day in and day out, whether it's business or personal.
Yeah.
Being able to have I have the honor of, I guess, being a trusted person that people can talk to. And well,
you have that. You totally have that energy. And that's why, turning your teams around, you do that with the positive versus the negative. There's so many organizations I've been a part of that's like, you do this or else, and we're like, or else what? You know what I mean? It's like, how about giving the tools? How about giving the platform? How about giving the,
it's not very motivating, right?
It's not. And putting people in all those things that you do, and in the name of your company, even Pathfinder, helping people find the right path. I mean, That's exactly who I think you are, because again, you go about it in a positive, open, and again, you listen. It's that give and take that you do that's just amazing, and you can lift people up really quickly. I loved having you in my workshop because you were always so fun. Every time I look over at you, you're always smile, and your brain was moving too, though. You know, you weren't just sitting there like, oh, this feels good, but you were like, what is she doing, and how does that feel? No, I'm not buying that one. You know what I mean? It was awesome. So
I know. I think you actually helped me out there, because you called me out in a good way, because I remember you saying, well, did you really relax?
yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, this is great. And you're like, because the whole time you were sitting there thinking about, well, what about this is a business idea? And what about this is a business idea? And that is how I'm wired. I mean, when it comes to people and even their businesses, I tend to look at the strengths of people. And like you said, how unmotivating is it to be told or else, versus how motivating is it to say, all right, these are the 3 things that you do incredibly well. And this is how it adds to the DNA of the team. Let's focus on that, forget the other stuff, or, let's address that in another way, but I want you focused on your strengths. And so, yeah, it is hard for me to turn my brain off. And the whole time I was sitting there, and I was so relaxed. I was like, oh, this feels so good. And I'm going to go do this in my little micro office, when I'm sitting there. And then I'm sitting there thinking, ooh, have you ever thought about doing this at big corporations? Have you ever thought about this? Have you thought about
That's right. Before major meetings, when people have to have a lot of brain power, right, and work together in collaboration, get everybody calm, get everybody at their base state, reduce the ego, drop all the crap away, real people talking about real issues. And as you said, the strength finders, what you're really good at, that's what you should be doing, and putting people in those roles, and then watch it just take off.
And then you just water it.
And water it, because there'll be enough fertilizer, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, we got enough bull around.
We don't have to worry about that stuff. Well, tell me a little bit about how you became interested in unconscious bias.
Unconscious bias, yeah, that's one of the big things that I like to focus on. So, for people that don't know, unconscious bias really is, if you think about it, we're shaped by our environment, we're shaped by what we see, we're shaped by our experiences, and that becomes the lens that we look through the world, right? And so, certainly today, my goodness, compared to in the past, we're constantly in social media. You've got the TV, you've got, you're just constantly bombarded with images and everything else, right? And so we form these lenses, and all of us do it. All of us do it. I mean, it's how we shape our view of the world. But some of those lenses aren't positive. And so what I like to do is challenge myself and challenge other people to really think about when we're encountering something different, and particularly, with what we're dealing with now when it comes to race relations and equality and equity and inclusion, let's kind of get to the root cause and get beyond our initial reaction, right? So let's get past that unconscious bias, that lens that we've formed, and create it and become conscious and aware of it. And then let's address it. If it's not right, let's change it.
Totally.
I'll tell an example of myself, which is, I'm not perfect. There are some things that I'm hypocritical on. It's always trying to be better, and aware every day, right? But a couple of weeks ago, I was actually getting ready to go to a meeting to talk to people about diversity, and I went out and my tire was flat, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be late for this thing, and I don't have time to change it myself. So I hopped in my wife's car, came back. I called AAA to meet me when I got back home. And this AAA truck shows up, and this, big black guy comes out, and he's got, tattoos and he's just this big guy,
Yeah.
And he comes walking, towards my car, his head's down, he's got the clipboard, and he's like, all right, what's the problem? And all this other stuff. And I started to put this defensive wall up, almost like, I mean, look, I'm telling my story here, right? So,
Yep,
I,
yep,
I'm not proud of this, but I was like, oh my God, this guy,
right.
a little scary. He knows where I live,
Mhm,
it's a
mhm,
nice car, and,
right.
and he starts fixing the car and everything. And I am a very curious person. So I started to just start a conversation. I was like, hey, so where are you from? And he's like, oh, I'm from Rocky Mount, just a couple of miles, hours from
Yeah,
here and all this other stuff. Well, it turns out that this guy came from a, single mother, um, rough gang related neighborhood, dug himself out, working two jobs, put
wow.
himself through school, had
Wow.
had a 4-year-old, was married, and he was like, I'm already saving for my kids' college. I'm already doing this. I'm already doing that. And I just, inside, I felt horrible because here it was, I judged this person on this unconscious bias.
Mhm.
And then going to the point of challenging yourself, I thought, why in the heck
Right.
do I even have this bias? Nobody that looks like this has ever done anything to me, ever, or my family. And so, how was that formed? Well, it was formed through what we see in media and news and society that big black guy with tattoos that looks like this is going to be
He's
aggressive.
scary. He's a bad guy.
Stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a black person. I'm sitting here judging another black person like this.
Well,
When in
that's what's kinda
reality,
gone through my head a little bit, but
yeah. Well, I mean, but
anybody.
right? I mean, when you're bombarded by this stuff, and so you start to get these viewpoints. Well, I challenged myself, to where did that come from? And then I really thought about it, and I thought about, gosh, the people that have hurt me the most have been the opposite of this guy, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so, I just kind of give that example, to say that nobody's perfect, even though I'm a diversity coach.
Right.
We all have this, but if you want to move past it, then understand it, challenge it, and grow from that. And so for now, my growth lesson from that situation is I'm not going to allow the feeling that I had happen the next time
Right.
I see somebody like that. I'm just
Right.
not. I'm going to know that everybody's got a story, and a lot of them are beautiful. And
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, somebody's walking around with a great story. By the time I got done talking to this guy, I was like,
Inspired,
just like
probably.
your session, right? Just like your session. I was like, have you ever thought about doing a talk? Have you ever thought about doing a book?
Exactly right.
People need to hear your story. Oh my God.
Right, right.
Man, you're amazing. Look at what you're doing. Look where you came
Yes.
from with no
Yes.
mentors,
Yes.
and pulled
Yes.
yourself forward. And now you could be a mentor for people, and we ended up having this great conversation. The poor guy, he ended up staying for a good 40 minutes probably after fixing the tire. And so, hopefully out of that interaction, we left in a
Yeah.
very positive place, but mentally I was, really embarrassed and ashamed of myself. But then but then I learned, and then I said, well, I got to learn. I can't beat myself up. I got to learn. So that's a
Well,
long-winded way of giving an example of unconscious bias.
but it's awesome because it shows that so many things. Number one, how superficial unconscious bias can be.
Oh yeah.
And how many of us in society, our perceptions are surface level only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and like you said, even if you're part of that group, you still, because of what? Because of the images. Who told you that somebody that looks like that is bad? But like you said, you weren't born with that. That came through society, right?
Right.
That came through culture. It came through something.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you're like me, you have to get over beating yourself up when you uncover that unconscious, because there's that, what was I thinking? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Right? Because it happens to me, and sometimes in reverse,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, when you think about who it is that's really hurt you, so there's a whole gender and culture of folks that immediately, when I see them sometimes, especially, I always question what they're saying and what the motives are.
Yeah.
But and now that's somewhat through experience of working with people like that for
Mm-hmm.
30 to 40 years. but it's that type people. And, like I worked in home building for 25 years and started getting into this place that I thought most all people were negative, ego driven, toxic people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, after being with Earth Monkey Energies for a year and a half, meeting people like you, meeting people like Kimberly, so many incredible people, I'm like, the world's full of amazing
Oh
people.
yeah.
Part of it is the environments, and then you have, a toxicity, same seeks same, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So then, I don't like this, I don't like that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I was told that women aren't suited for the field in home building. Well, I'll tell you why they're not suited for the field, because all of you guys out there saying that we're not suited for the field.
Field, right? Yeah. I mean, you think about that kind of stuff throughout history, right? As a minority, and when I say minority, it's not just, Black. It's, you're a female, right? Latino, people of color, just whatever. You think about the military, right? I'm a veteran. And so I actually just had this conversation a little while ago with somebody saying that, if you really think about it, not to take away from patriotism from everybody, but black people who are in the military are probably some of the most patriotic people in the world, because, I remember I read somewhere that said, the first person who was killed in the revolution was a Black person. And then you had Black people that volunteered for the revolution. You had Black people that volunteered during the Civil War. So you kind of keep going through history. You had Black people who volunteered for World War II, who came home to Jim Crow and segregation, right? But still believed in the ideals of what the Constitution meant, what the dream of an America meant, and the dream of equality. And so, if you kind of, keep going forward, and now we have, it's a desegregated military, people are equal, you've got, minorities everywhere, and we still got a long way to go. Like, I was one of the people early on in the military. It was like, hey, listen, if a woman wants to go in the infantry and she can handle it, hey, go. That's your right. That's freedom, man. That go for it, because I know a lot of guys that can't make it in the infantry, but just because they have different parts, they can go in and you can't, man. So there's still, we're making progress, and we're seeing it every day. But to your point, kind of going back to your story, somebody has to blaze that trail. My mom was one of the first female mechanics, and male dominated
Totally
situation. My dad was a mechanic and my mom was a mechanic, and I just wish it would have rubbed off on me a little bit. Maybe I would have changed that tire and not brought that poor guy out that night.
But you made a good friend, though, all at the same time.
I made a good friend. But it takes those trailblazers like you, and then it also takes advocates. It takes people to be able to say, no, I'm going to hire you in this male-dominated industry because I see your strengths and your attributes. I mean, for me, that's what I've hired so many people in my career, and that's what I looked at. I didn't care what, color or anything was on there, or your gender or anything. It was, what are your strengths and attributes, and what do I need on the team here?
Well, I remember I worked at Carowinds for 2 summers. Carowinds is for anybody that doesn't know, is a theme park, amusement park in North Carolina and South Carolina. It's a lot of fun. First year I worked on the rides. It was fun. Anybody and everybody could work on the rides. There was not any discrimination there. But then I wanted to work in the finance office. And the position they had open was on the games crew. And the manager, who'd been there for, 20 plus years or whatever, Charlie, he called me in, and this was like 25 years ago, maybe even longer than that. But anyway, and he goes, "We've never had a woman on the games crew." And I said, "Give me a shot. Why haven't you had a woman? What's the issue?" Because the women in the finance office were in the back counting the money. The men were you know what I mean? Like, what's the deal? And he's like, "Well, the buckets are heavy." Because that was back in the day with the quarters, with the video games.
Oh, yeah.
The buckets are heavy. and I'm not really going to back then I was in a lot better shape, but I was like, try me,
Bring it.
Exactly, bring it. If I can't carry it, I'm sure I'll find somebody that can. Come on now, But anyway, so at the end, let's just say at the end of the season, he said, you're a folk hero now at Carowinds because you're the only woman that's been on Games Crew and you rocked it out. So good job for you. But that's what you're seeing is he gave me a chance, even though physically there was a question, I'll say though, I think I was stronger than the one of the guys, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
So he opened his mind and opened the opportunity up. And, hopefully, now that's a very small story, but hopefully, it opened other people's minds up to this is typically this kind of role or that kind of role. That's who fits it. Well, you know what? That's how we get stuck, I think, as a society. Don't you think, Jay and Mark?
Well, yeah, I would say so. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Hey, glad to join y'all. Definitely, I was enjoying the conversation and definitely was relating to some things that have gone on in my life and everything. I've actually got my uncle's mother, who was actually one of the premier plumbers here in Durham and everything. So she and her two of her kids, a daughter and a son, actually started this plumbing company. So I can't remember whether it was Walker Plumbing or whatever, but I know her name was Bernice Walker, and she was definitely a plumber that was doing a lot of that kind of work and involved in that. I think she did mostly like the bookkeeping and things of that nature, but they started this African-American plumbing company and things right here in Durham. So they were definitely shattering those roles. And as I've told you before, Tish, my parents started a radio station with no kind of background in radio. They just decided that they wanted one in Warrenton, North Carolina, and eventually it moved to Rocky Mount. I heard you mention Rocky Mount. Yeah. It moved to Rocky Mount, and then eventually it went off the air in Rocky Mount. But Mom was involved with Golden Leaf Foundation, which of course is in Rocky Mount as well. So definitely I was hearing that, and I was also thinking about my own life and everything, because there's a gentleman here who a lot of people would probably not think is engaged in the kind of things he's engaged in because of the stereotypes. He's working at a convenience store. He's probably been involved in the past. He's very open about it, so I'm not saying anything out of school, but he's been involved in the past with gang-related things and things of that nature. But he's now working on becoming an independent filmmaker and a musician and things of that nature. So oftentimes we will have conversations and I'll engage with him, talk about things that we're doing here on IBM.TV and other things that I'm involved with in the music and film industry. So basically becoming almost like a mentor to him and everything. But a lot of folks, if they saw him, they would probably be like, another lost cause, another cause that isn't going to do anything. And that's a stereotype that I think is too often out there that we have to get away from, because there's too often those stereotypes that people want to put in because of people's past mistakes. And I don't know about YouTube, but I don't know anybody that hasn't made a mistake in life, whether it's a mistake in relationships, a mistake in parental relationships, a mistake like he might have done in culture and things of that nature. But we all make mistakes, and if we're going to write people off because of those mistakes, then we're making a big mistake, in my opinion. But I'd love to hear what you've got to say about that, Mr. Graves.
Yeah. Well, no, those are great stories. I matter of fact, I'm big on mentorship. And if my wife is watching right now, she's probably just laughing like crazy because we had this conversation when we were both in the military together, and I think we were either early marriage or maybe still dating, and she had a mentor, and she was like, well, there's this mentor. I'm going to talk to my mentor. And young cocky Jay, right? I'm like, what's a mentor? It's like, well, somebody that kind of gives me advice and stuff like that. I'm like, I know this stuff, man. I'm not going to anybody. What are you doing? And I was just, it was immature, right? And then as I matured on it, realizing that I would not have been where I am today without mentors, without sponsors, without people, seeing something in me and stepping in at the right times. And so I became to really embrace mentorship. I mentor people now. I volunteer with mentor organizations and things like that because, some people come from environments where they don't have access to that, and they don't have access to they don't know what they don't know, right? So if you grow up in in a community where, it's poor, it's, multi-generations maybe, of the same kind of situation. There's depression, there's anxiety, and what you see in that community, who's making the money? The drug dealers, the people that are doing dirt, right? They're the ones with the nice cars, they're the ones with the money, they're the ones with this and the status and everything else. And so if you don't know any different from that, one of the things that frustrates me the most is when people say, well, just move. Well, okay. All right. Like, my family has done a phenomenal job of my mom and dad and sister. I mean, we're a tight family, and we have had rough times. Now, we always stayed together as a family, and it's a tight knit thing. And that's one of the lessons I took in my life. But we were homeless for a short time. We lived at a campground. We grew up I grew up for a little while in a not a trailer, but a travel trailer, a holiday rambler. If you remember
the holiday rambler.
And, which is why now I need to get my RV fixed. But if you haven't been in that situation, hearing somebody say, well, just what's going on in Chicago? Look at all these murders. Well, why don't these people just leave? What? and off of what platform, off of what influence, off of what stepping stone, and off of who? Somebody has to come in and help you lift and at least show you the way. Now, you have to be willing to listen. So, Mr. Lee, like you were just saying, this individual, somebody stepped in and they're willing to listen and they're willing to change. So it works on both sides, right? But I am a huge advocate for, mentorship. I volunteer with SCORE. I don't know if you guys are familiar with SCORE, but it's a all volunteer organization. It's a nonprofit. It's nationwide. And basically it started off as retired CEOs back in the 50s, and they would mentor people to help them start their businesses. And so, today that's what we do. We provide business coaching and everything else. So while I do it in my company, I wanted to also be able to serve people who couldn't afford it.
Awesome.
And so I volunteer time there. Well, one of the things that we just started, a small group of us, is a 13-week session at Shaw University where, we teach business planning, and the goal of it is to take your concept to the point where if you need to ask for funding, you're ready to ask for funding. Like you're ready for that, So, we're helping you through all stages of everything. But we realized we needed to go to the community because as we were mentoring folks, we realized this was probably the biggest gap, was just the fundamental basic business education. And so for me, it's kind of, you got to attack things where they are. And you got to be able to, but it takes mentorship and sponsorship to really help people. And, kind of with the theme, right? You're planting seeds. So if we have 100 people that show up to that class, and we have 20 who come out with, viable minority-owned businesses, and it's open to anybody. It doesn't have to be a minority, but we're going to the community because, NC State. I went to NC State undergrad. I went to UNC for my MBA. Those places have well-funded entrepreneur programs.
Yes.
Shaw, St. Aug's, HBCUs don't, and so that's why we're focusing there. But hopefully, if you get 20 businesses out of there, or people who even come out of there with just the business acumen, and they go into their own corporate situation, but they can leverage that knowledge and grow and be successful and understand the power of education. Maybe you've changed a generation of people.
Yep.
Speaking of which, and I'm just curious, because as you said that, it got me to thinking, why do you think that so many of the businesses that are minority owned don't come back? I mean, we always hear that concept of wanting to come back to our neighborhood and things of that nature. But you're right, UNC, Duke, I see them oftentimes coming back, but I don't see enough of that from the HBCUs and from our business leaders, our sports leaders, our entertainment leaders. I mean, there are exceptions, but I don't see enough of it. And I'm just wondering, do you have any theories as to why you think that is?
That's a great question. So I was actually on a podcast just before this one, and it was a panel. It was fairly similar to this, and that actually came up. And what we were talking about was there is a propensity, unfortunately, of I got mine, I made it. I had to work hard for it. I had to learn the game. I had to learn to navigate it. And I'm here. I've got, and so I think there is, as we were having this conversation, I think there is some of that. I also, though, wonder if there just aren't really good programs to encourage people to come back. And that's one of the things that we actually do want to try to do. We want to get, successful minority business owners to be a part of our classes, because we're really going to be doing more storytelling than anything, right? Just to engage with people. We're going to give them the education that they need. We're going to give them the tools they need, but we also, everybody who is volunteering for this, we all own our own businesses, and we're all minorities. So we have to have that. But to your point, it is a need. And I don't have an exact answer other than, do we encourage people to come back? Or maybe people are coming back and we don't hear about it. Maybe it's a lack of communication. But somewhere in there is something broken, because if people are coming back and doing, able to say, hey, this is what I've done. I'm here to impart my knowledge. I'm here to help you step off and be successful and give you the tools that you need. Either we're not hearing it or it's not happening. I will say on LinkedIn, this is Desmond, right? The guy that owns Fubu and, is on Shark Tank and all of that, has been really active. And I decided to follow him on LinkedIn. It's been really active on, hey, I want to hear these stories from other minority owned businesses. I want to understand what, and he'll throw a question out every day and I participate. I throw stuff on there and it ends up turning into a dialogue. And I've had, kind of chat start on the side where we started helping each other out. Some people say, well, I did this, but I'm having a hard time with my business development, and somebody will say, oh, that was my biggest struggle and now I'm successful at it. And this is what I did. So, from a kind of that celebrity level, that person that does have that level of influence and reach, that is a name that does stick out to me.
Yeah, good. Glad to see that there are some folks that are doing that kind of work and everything of that nature, because I do know that sometimes that doesn't happen enough. And like I said, I wish that it would happen more often. So I'm glad that there are people that are doing that kind of encouraging work and are actually trying to work on putting those business visions out there, because I think we need more of those.
Yeah. Well, and there's another reality to it too. And I've been, walking around with a stat in my head, and I've probably mentioned it a million times to people, because I'm still trying to noodle on, I want to do something with it. But, I saw recently, I was in a McKinsey article that 68% of CEOs are white males. And the amount of white females is growing, because there's a ton of initiatives, on women in business, which is phenomenal. And I've been a part of, some of those, and it's incredibly important. But 2% are black males, are CEOs, and 1% are black females. And so there's also just not a big population when you comparatively, for me, where I'm trying to understand is, how can we identify some of those black male CEOs that have made it? What are their stories? What did they have to deal with? How do they navigate things? Are they like me, where they started their own company and they, took the title CEO, or, did they rise through the ranks? I want to start peeling the onion back. And then for the 68%, one of the mistakes I think a lot of people make when we're talking about race and things is saying, well, 68%, that's horrible. That's not fair. Well, your advocates are going to come from that 68%. So How do we unleash, a percentage of those folks to say, hey, you are open-minded. You do believe in diversity. So what does the pipeline look like in your organization, when it comes to diversity? How do we start to groom people in your pipeline to become your replacement? Because we know that's how it works. I came from corporate America. That's how it works. You get groomed, you get moved around, and that you're in a short list to become the next VP or the next CEO. So how do we address that, and how do we make that, expand that number, so to speak?
Right. And the interesting thing, connecting that with the fact that people don't bring it back, that would be for those CEOs to stand up. Zach, hey dude, there's funk from the front seat. Zach Robinson.
Mr. Lee, I'm coming over to your house next time. This looks like a lot of fun.
Right.
Okay, that actually just raised the question and everything. Got to laugh at Zach popping over here and everything. But one of the things I sometimes wonder about is the whole entrepreneurship thing. Because you just said that there's 2% of African Americans that are in the CEO category and 1% of African American women. We don't, and the numbers are probably comparable for like the Latin population and maybe a little bit higher for the Asian population, but very comparable. But then I have to wonder how many entrepreneurs are not counted in that category, because I think that we are very entrepreneurial people, meaning most minority populations, definitely a lot of women are very entrepreneurial. Tish is an amazing entrepreneur. So definitely we have these great entrepreneurs, but I don't know that entrepreneurs are necessarily counted when they have those low figures, because there are so many people that are entrepreneurs. Now, given some of the entrepreneurs are just like you said earlier, they create a company that might not be doing anything, slap the title of I'm CEO or entrepreneur on it, but they aren't actually producing any results. They just have made a company in for namesake only. But I've also seen quite a few folks that have some amazing entrepreneurial businesses. They might be artists, they might be craftsmen, they might be activists of different sorts, because they can be entrepreneurs as well. They might be in various business things. We talked about your mom being a mechanic. I mentioned the plumber that's on my uncle's side. So they might be in those kind of fields. So I just think that there are a lot of entrepreneurs that are out there that aren't counted. And I don't know if you feel the same way.
Certainly. And if you look at something like a McKinsey report, right, they're going to be canvassing, national, global, it is going to be just a sample. So I think you're right. I mean, just being involved in the startup and the entrepreneur community and things that I do with SCORE. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who do have small businesses that aren't going to be called by McKinsey, or Deloitte and included in their numbers. So yeah, we're certainly missing a segment. We're certainly missing a segment there.
But I think it's valid, though. It's a valid point that in major corporations, you don't see a lot of minorities at the head or even the head of departments. It's like you reach that point and then it almost, I'll go ahead and I'll mention I was at Toll Brothers for quite a few years, and I remember when they won Builder of the Year, it was all like 12 white men and 1 woman. It's like, yeah, that she's the token. Yeah. Okay. But it was no other cultures represented, so I think it happens 100%. And then the people they groom, a lot of times, like they may notice that someone from another, a minority or different gender or something that they have intelligence, but we're going to put you here. But then we're going to take this, I'm going to go ahead and say it. We're going to take this white guy and shoot him up, like you said, and groom him up. It's kind of because there's a ceiling that other folks, I feel like, if likes like, and if you're not like, then there's going to be a ceiling potentially. And that's where, Jay, I want to explore, you always like to go about in a positive, let's peel the onion. Let's build this mousetrap with positivity. Right. Mm-hmm. And there's been people that have shared with me that sometimes that unconscious bias comes through the rhetoric that we use. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I used to be, because, I'm very humble, but I used to use, and I still, when I'm not paying attention, I use, what do you think? Well, do you think that? Well, the other day I was kind of thinking about this, or, maybe we should consider this, instead of saying, we need to think about this now. You know what I mean? Yeah. So part of it, somebody explained to me that I was kind of creating that myself by not using the verbiage. Now that's using the verbiage of the mainstream. That's using the words the ways they understand. Like I'll bring up my brother again. If I'm not direct with my brother, he's like, what's up, Tish? So I just got to boom, like 2 or 3 words. There it is. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. But so I think sometimes, not across the board, but sometimes we can almost create that unconscious bias against ourselves by the way we talk, walk, dress, hold ourselves, that whole kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's so much to unpack in that, right? There's the funny thing. We always make jokes about corporate speak, right?
Yeah, yeah, right.
People get so tired of it. One of the things that I did struggle with in corporate was there is a game that has to be played. Sometimes I'm not that great at playing it.
I'm not good at games.
And so unfortunately for me, like what I would tend to do would be to take kind of that neutral, even though I would have like a hard stance on something, I would think, boy, the political environment in here is one that could be detrimental almost instantly. And one of the things that the reason why I was successful in working with teams is because, I don't believe in a zero tolerance situation. I believe in promoting psychological safety. So, speak up.
Psychological safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just that ability to be able to speak up and we can disagree.
Mm-hmm.
We can do it through respect, but it's not going to come back on you. Like if you are somebody who I see as a great talent and you are, I am grooming you to take my role and I'm doing everything I can to uplift you and your career and everything else. Well, you may say something and we may be at major odds around it, but I that's okay. I respect that. And it doesn't mean that now I'm going to go back and I'm going to put a line through your name. Well, there are certainly some times when I would be in situations where I knew that pen was like this.
Yep. Yes, sir.
You start like, oh. Yeah. Well, I mean, that at times would hurt my career.
Yeah.
Because some people who knew me really well would say, I know you have something on your mind. I know you have a hard stance on this. Speak up. And people would say like, what happened, and it was like self-preservation, right? I've worked so hard to get here.
I have a family to feed.
And then, when I reflected on those times, there were times when actually I didn't have a sponsor. And so I was kind of on my own. I didn't have an advocate or mentor that could turn around and say something, that could help me out or give me advice or anything like that. Right. So, certainly there are those times when you start to go into that neutral speak, but it never helped me. Now that I do consulting, one of the things that I really try to be cognizant of is people aren't hiring me to be Pollyanna, right?
Be nice.
I'm a nice, positive person.
Right.
But if you've got something wrong, like, if you're challenging, you're if we're talking about diversity and let's look at your population and start putting together some metrics and goals and you start to make excuses, I'm going to call that BS out.
Right.
And because you're paying me, to help guide you into a better way for your organization. I'm not doing you any good if I sit there and just tap dance around. So I do think there are definitely times when, we should be direct. And, it's just communication. It's just interpersonal communication and EQ, right? I mean, it's just being open-minded and I'm willing to listen. If you're willing to listen and we can disagree, that's fine.
It's contribution and compassion, not competition. And that's that whole psychological safety zone, I think, is where you know that you can contribute. And even if they're not going to pick up on it, you're able to say what you need to say. And that is, I think, where teams can grow the most, right? Is because if you always go down this line, then what? You're always going to go down that line, right? Bring in some other ideas. Woo!
Well, you're never going to have, going to diversity and the psychological safety and the inclusion. All those to me come together or have to reside together to be successful. And, if you bring in say a diverse team and whether that's, race, gender, ethnic, whatever. I mean, everything, you're going to get different thought. You're going to get different viewpoints. You're going to get different contributions. But if you stifle that contribution, you're going to have, like, one of the first things I look at for people, companies, look at their turnover rates. And the reason being is because turnover rates, if people can't speak up and you're not leveraging their strengths and or you're not inclusive, maybe you can have a diversity initiative all day long,
Yes.
then, then you're going to lose people.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
a leading indicator that I always look at, or an indicator that I always look at, is that turnover rate. And then I start to, again, peel the onion back and say, okay, what's the turnover rate amongst your different, ethnicity in this organization? Because that'll definitely point towards an inclusive and open culture in your organization. And it'll also point towards your psychological safety. But if you can do all those things well, then you're going to have an innovative team. You're going to have a team. I mean, I loved it when I could sit there with my team and I would say, we have to solve this issue. This is on us, right?
Right.
And the team, somebody would stand up and start going on the whiteboard. And then they would be fighting and debating. And then they would be this. And they would be that.
Yes.
And then that's when I would kind of sit back and just kind of, maybe guide emotions, but order a pizza. But, but to me, but one thing we always had was respect. So there was never that, there was I disagree and I'm being direct and here's why.
Yeah.
But there was never coming out of that conference room of a lack of respect or animosity towards somebody. It was, we are all just so passionate about this because the problem we're trying to solve. I mean, I was in healthcare. Ultimately, we're trying to save lives. We're impacting patients, right? So we're just passionate about that.
For real.
From. So, I think, I guess in the long-winded way of saying that, having that open dialogue is key.
But, let me ask you this too. So we often talk about, the leader is key to the atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at all these organizations, what is your belief? Like, so let's say that the leader, the president, whatever, let's say that he's good being surrounded by his cronies, right? Or her, it happens all, both genders. So what is the chance of that organization, if the head of it has a great deal of unconscious bias and isn't listening, doesn't care, then what's the chance of that organization actually embracing, what everybody has to offer?
Low.
Yeah,
very
right.
low. I mean, I've seen where people have started grassroots diversity programs because their organizations weren't necessarily doing it. And I've seen it go both ways. I've seen where there became an awareness with the leadership team and they understood like, oh, wow, I hadn't even thought about it for whatever reason.
Right.
And they become that sponsor. They unlock budget. They empower people to execute a program. They bring in consultants. I mean, I've seen it go that way. I've seen it go the other way where they think, oh, okay, well, there's grassroots groups out there and that's great. Well, the veterans have a group now and the Black folks have a group now and the gay folks have a group now, Latinos have a group now. And then they just are oblivious. And that's when that turnover starts to happen. I've definitely seen where you've had similar companies. So, particularly in healthcare, right? They tend to cluster in certain cities where one company will just not have a very good culture when it comes to diversity and equity, and another one does. And they're siphoning off the top of the best of the best out of that company. I've seen that so many times. And that ultimately weakens that organization. And, depending on how that organization is oriented, if they're public or not, can have an impact. But you have to have leader support. You have to. In my program that I do, the first thing I do is I interview the leaders because, and actually, like on my website, I have kind of a wheel, and the first thing is alignment, right? That's the first. Because if there isn't that alignment, and I can tell. If there isn't that alignment, if it's just there superficial, if it's just there because it's the flavor of the day, I won't do it. I just won't. Probably leave money on the table. Somebody else can take that, but I'm not going to set up a failed program. And that means the leaders have to be open-minded. They have to buy in. They have to be supportive.
How can you tell? Because I know there's a lot of people that use a lot of words. And there's, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm for it. Yes, we are doing this, so I'm wondering if there's some way that you can tell right off. And then a second thing, while you're talking, you mentioned unlocking budget for diversity, and I'm just curious what that entails as well. But how can you tell, first of all, that the leaders are ready or not?
I go into strengths. I have tons of things that I got to work on, but one of the strengths that I do have is reading people, and just having an ability to connect with people. And so I just use my personal strength of that, in conversations. Nice. It doesn't take me very long to understand kind of where somebody's coming from and how genuine they are. So I've just.
Wow. That's, sorry to interrupt, but what an honor that you're here today, that you're my friend. Let's move on.
That's why I was honored to be brought on here, because I know what you're doing, and I know what you're.
You both have great energy. That's what it is, and everything. You both have great energy. I was actually enjoying the conversation, and y'all just have great energy. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
What about the unconscious bias? I know we were talking about that earlier, but sometimes that unconscious bias is even unconscious bias that isn't recognized. Because I was thinking about a good friend of mine who actually works for, and I don't know the name of the company, so I can't even say the name of the company, but she works for a company that is basically Indian owned. So they are owned and run by Indian folks and things of that nature. She is a minority herself, and I know that she sometimes has unconscious bias about that population, whether that's based on her own experiences or whatever. But even in like conversations, she'll bring these unconscious bias to the forefront, and I'm going to myself, I'm like, wait a minute. We're part of a minority population ourselves. How can you have this bias against another minority population? Yeah. But I was wondering, do you run into that sometimes, and how do you deal with that on the corporate level?
I do. And, I think, we all have cultural traits, right? If you're working, so I worked for Roche, which is a, very heavy, European, Swiss German influence. So you're going to be in meetings, I'd sit in global meetings all the time, and there are just cultural traits that different groups are going to have. And so for me, what I would do is I would just understand that. And I would just say that, if I was talking to maybe some folks from Germany, tend to be more direct, right? I wouldn't take it personal. I wouldn't say like, wow, these are some rude people, man.
They're mad.
I wouldn't turn around and blanket every German and say, German people are rude, right? I wouldn't do that, And so, for me in those situations, if I would hear something, and something that I do coach people to do is if you hear something and there's a flag that goes out that says, just like you said, Shirley, hey, well, wait a minute, we're a minority and you're sitting here saying this stuff, like I'll speak up about it. Going back to Tish, what you were saying, kind of speaking up, I'll speak up about it and say, well, wait a minute, there's some cultural things, and then kind of where you're going is into a little bit more beyond, like, this is just how this culture works. You're going a little further into that, maybe racist area here, right? And just bring that open, and that because it's called unconscious for a reason. That person may not even know, and so it's our job to call that out. Not saying to be aggressive about it, but just say, hey, wait a minute, think about this. Like, think about when people say this about your people, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe it unlocks that awareness, and they have that kind of aha moment that I had, with Chase Fire. Just understanding what's cultural differences, and then where you're starting to go a little too far there.
It seems like you're encouraging for opening dialogue. I know that Deborah Graves said that earlier that it's even vital to have that in family situations, that open dialogue and everything. So you got to have that open dialogue in all situations, even in those family ones.
That's my mom. Yeah. So,
but she's right, because we have, like, I know I have unconscious, or actually I have conscious bias with, like, my stepmother, for example, because of past experiences. I go in to the family situation and then I sit like I did, 45 years ago. So I think she's totally right.
Well, really what she's kind of speaking to is, we're an interracial family. And, when my parents were married on my mom's side, she's white, they're from Indiana. It was not accepted at all. And, I wrote an article entitled "My Grandfather Was a Racist," and in that I explain a time when I was a teenager and my grandfather pulled me aside. We were on vacation and he was just in tears. And he said, "I have to tell you this story." And he went back to say, like, he went all the way back to the beginning and basically talked about how he was raised, with, there was like a Klan influence in the family. It was in rural Indiana. He had never seen a black person before. When I remember him telling me, he's like, what I saw on TV was blackface and all black people wanted to rape white women. Like, that was like what was on TV, right? Back then. And when he went into World War II, he was a radar tech, and he said, I was told black people won't be don't worry, black people won't be anywhere in this area because they're too stupid. They'll be in the kitchen. They're not allowed to man the weapons, so don't worry. Black people aren't going to blow up our ship. And he was unloading like all this stuff that shaped his unconscious bias, right? And I remember him saying, when your parents, got married, the image that they were seeing was, the riots, right? In late 60s and 70s, the riots, and in his mind and his friends and community, it was, these stupid black people were burning down their own neighborhoods, so that was what shaped his view. And he admitted, he said, I was racist because of that. And I disowned your mom, and I, didn't like your dad because of that view. And the reason why I wrote that article wasn't to just say he was a racist. Well, I never knew him as a racist, right? I mean, this was all before me. And so when I was born, my grandmother demanded that she was going to come see her grandbaby, right?
Yay!
My granddad, came on the trip, and that started the process of communication.
Taking that out,
and it wasn't instantaneous. It took time. And he admitted, he said, it was like a cancer. He said it grew for all those years, and he said, and I had to cut it out because I loved you and I loved your dad, and I realized that I remember him saying, his concern when he saw me was, people like me are going to make life hard for my grandchild. And and he said, and that's when he really lost it, and he knew that he had to change, and he did. And that's the whole point of the article, is that, that society and things that we see shape us, and that becomes a really strong lens. And until you can somehow unlock that unconscious bias, whether it's his situation of, seeing a grandbaby and meeting my dad, who's a wonderful, wonderful person who loved, his wife or his daughter, whatever that situation is, to become the catalyst, then you can create change to where I never knew him that way at all. I always knew him as a he's still with us today. I know him as a loving person, right? And matter of fact, one of the first times, I was telling a story the other day, one of the first times I was really kind of faced with racism was I was, I don't know, maybe whatever Cub Scout age is, right? Third grade or something. I was playing in their front yard, and I was a Cub Scout, and this group of Cub Scouts comes walking down the street, and I went running up to them, and I'm waving, and I'm like, I'm a Cub Scout too. And they started throwing rocks at me, calling me a nigger. And like, my granddad came out and, protected me and went and talked to the families and stuff like that. So I never knew my grandfather's past until he explained it to me, because what I saw was him coming to my rescue in that situation, and never being racist. So, the whole thing is a story about, that open-minded, that empathy, that learning to change and love. Unfortunately, the title, I think, upset some people in the family. And so, mom might be referring back to that. And that, even to this day, we really just kind of have to keep the dialogue going, even with our own family, because we do have a side of the family that's Black and does have experiences. And we're going through a pretty big shift culturally now in society. And, I'm outspoken. And so, we're kind of at that point. But I also know that we love each other, and that we're all coming from, from our lenses right now. right? So
That's awesome. But Jay, I have a question though, and it's 2:00. I hope you can go a little bit longer. I hope the time's okay.
Oh, sure, yeah, I didn't even look at the time.
But one of my questions is, so you can take two people and put them in the exact same situation, and one person might pick up an unconscious bias and one person may not. Like, so for example, I dated black guys back when when you'd get those looks actually from both sides. I remember one time my boyfriend and I were walking down the street and there was a bunch of black girls that were walking up and they got all up in it. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Giving him hell. And I'm like,
yeah, I've had that happen. Yeah.
So it's like, what in the world? But my point is, and so I had some friends that didn't understand. Like, I never look at skin color. I never look at culture. If anything, it's a way that I can learn from you, right? Like, what kind of foods do you eat? What kind of music do you listen to? How's all that work? But I've had friends grow up same way, right beside me. Oh, you can't go out with it. You shouldn't do that. Blah, 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 blah. So my question really is, why does it affect some people one way and other people another way?
Well, it probably goes back to either how you're wired and probably a combination of things, how you're wired, and then what were you taught? So, I did have, I was dating a white person. My wife's white now. Yeah. I was dating a white person in high school, and I did have a couple of black friends that were girls pull me aside, and they were like, "Why are you dating outside your race?" Well, interestingly enough, mentally, I was really struggling with the fact that for most of my young life, I wasn't really embraced by white or black. I mean, not wholesale, right? But I had a group of people that were like your friends that just didn't see it, right? They were my core friends. No issues.
Right. It's all good.
Not feel like people were staring at me. I mean, it was all good. And I still talk to those folks to this day. Beautiful friends. And I would walk into some houses and it'd be like, "Whoa, what are you doing bringing this this person in?" So I was internally at the time when I remember this incident specifically when I was confronted by, "Why are you not dating your people?" I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute. Like, some black people weren't accepting me as, and some black people weren't accepting me. So now all of a sudden you're calling me a black guy and saying, why am I dating a white girl?" So, but I really think it's how you're wired and what you know. I mean, there are, strong opinions in the black community of keep it black, and don't breed it out, and and things like that. And so, if your environment is one that way, that's going to be your bias. That's going to be your way.
Now, let me ask you this though: how much of that? Because a long time ago, I like to simplify things, right? Very simple, even though it's not. But we can put them in buckets, right? So, long time ago, somebody told me everything either comes from love or fear. And I've had a lot of conversations. People are like, "Oh, anger," and I'm like, "But." Anger, yes, Deborah. All people are your people. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I just noticed the pop up.
She's on, man. She's got it.
Mom's woke.
You had a good mentor.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
No,
we're a great family.
I totally forgot my train of thought. It's totally gone. Well,
love or the date and everything of that nature.
Said everything.
That will put you back in the thought of what you were thinking, just to put it in that same thought, because I was thinking of what you were saying. Maybe this will help you get your thoughts back, Tish, where you were going with that question. But I remember in college, and I was in the 80s, I actually went out with a young lady who was white. We actually went to go see Coretta Scott King speak. And while we were there, and it was sponsored, I think, by the Black Student Association of Marquette, where I went to school. So I do remember getting a lot, and I do mean a lot, of zebra jokes while I was things of that nature. But while I was getting those zebra jokes, and most of those were coming from the white students. Marquette is a predominantly white institution and things of that nature. It's not an HBCU, but so I get most of those from fellow students that were white students. But then I went to the reception, and that's kind of where I had the reaction that you're talking about, Tish. A lot of the sisters were very much shunning me and putting me off to the side. They were like, "Why did you come to see Coretta with this white young lady, and why did you then have the nerve to bring her to our reception and things of that nature?" So there was a lot of that going on, but unfortunately, it's still going on to this day. Because I know that I had a guest on one of our other IBM.TV shows who was a Reverend Briscoe. He is married to a white woman as well, and he said something about the fact that when he got married, he got a comment about that the preacher actually was making a comment to him, like, I know that your family probably really would like you to be with a sister and not necessarily with this woman that you're marrying. And that was said from the pulpit. So that was from the pulpit that this remark was made.
So I will say that it's still very prominent. I guess two things. One, just with my own family, my family notices it. Like if we walk around the mall, people will look, or, and when we lived, in the Midwest, I have great friends from there. So again, I don't make blanket statements, but I remember I went to a pork festival because I love to smoke pig. Right? And so I wanted to see how they did it. And some people were like, "Oh man, you went up to that community? Like, you should be careful going up there. There's like pretty big Klan influence there." And when we were there, we were walking around. I mean, it reminded me of when I was younger, when people would just blatantly stare at you like, "What the hell are you doing here?
Yeah.
What are you doing with these?" And staring at my family with anger as well. And so it's still alive and well. We've come a long way. I have to admit that, with one of my COVID releases is we watch some stupid TV shows. And one of the ones we've been watching is this show called 90 Day Fiance. Just Google
What's it called?
90 Day Fiance.
90 Day. Okay.
So it's all about, people who are bringing somebody from another country in, and they have 90 days to get married because that's the law. So, so it's just trash, and we just watch it when we laugh. But interestingly enough, the last 2 seasons, they've had a couple of interracial couples, and every single one of them have dealt with massive racism. And I just was sitting there, and I'm like, I can't, some of the stuff, like in the last episode, actually, this couple's getting married. The guy's black from Jamaica. They're in Pennsylvania. And people are putting like a bunch of racial and death threats on their register because it's like I was told in the 2nd grade my parents were illegal for getting married. So that kind of stuff is still going on, and that's just going back to what you're saying. I think it's just how some people are wired. We're not born racist. I mean, you're taught, and you're taught by.
But I could have been taught the same way. I mean, I had a grandmother that one year I was going to bring my boyfriend home for Thanksgiving, and she called me crying, "You're not going to do that to us."
Yeah.
So I'll say I was born, in that type environment in that small town, but I
wired different.
I don't understand what makes. Honestly, I don't understand. I mean, bottom line.
That's just your spirit and your soul, right?
We're all the same.
Yeah.
We're all the same. We're all human beings. We're all going through this journey together. And if we all work together and learn from each other, it could be paradise, right? I mean, we could have heaven right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we opt to work together.
Yeah, bottom line, yeah, you're right.
There's too many things in society, and I agree with you, Tish, that if we work together, this could be paradise on earth and everything of that nature. But unfortunately, there are too many things that divide in society that are things that are superficial. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to call it out there. They're very superficial. I don't care whether it's religious beliefs. Because that's in some ways a very superficial thing, because a lot of those beliefs are based on the same thing. If you go to the world religions, they're all based on the same thing, which is love and all of that. So they're based on the same principles, but we unfortunately get caught up in the division factor and the fighting factor. And the same even with the corporate America, because one of the things I remember is for a brief time, I worked at GlaxoSmithKline, when only with Glaxo at the time. And I remember that one of the things that I hated about that was it was literally, to some degree, a plantation here in the Triangle, because
Oh, wow.
I say that because the majority of the corporate people, the executives, were white males, like you just said earlier. The majority of those in the what we would consider the working class jobs, whether that was the cleaning crew, and I used to know their name, I think it was FDS, or whether it was the cafeteria, or whether it was some of the other fields like that. I was in shipping and receiving, were usually those that were of the minority community. So, and I don't think that they're alone in that corporate structure here in this area or in the world. Unfortunately, that's the way that too many of them are set up,
Yes.
and things of that nature. So the kind of work that you're doing, that's breaking those diversity, that's bringing that diversity and breaking those barriers, I think helps us get to a better place in our world, and things of that. We can't get to a better place in our world if we have diverse viewpoints, because we have to have
That's
diverse
right.
viewpoints in order to be a more successful society. At least that's what I think. I think we need diverse viewpoints from the top on down to the bottom, and everything of that nature. I mean, we've been seeing that now. If it's all right with you, Tish, to go there with our vice presidential candidate and everything, who folks forget actually is part of a biracial relationship. Her mom, I forget which one, but one of her parents was Indian and an Indian immigrant, and the other one was from Jamaica. So she is definitely biracial. I mean, I'm glad that she gets the props for being African American and everything of that nature, but in truth, she's actually of the biracial background, and the same with the president that came before this current silly president we have in office right now, because Barack was biracial. He came from, his mom was from, I think, Kansas, and his dad was of Kenyan descent. So people forget about the fact that a lot of times these great folks are coming from these kind of like blended cultures, and I am a big fan of us not doesn't have to be relationships, but just learning from different cultures. Like I said, I love you know, what Zach brought was some Dunkin', so that ain't exactly blended or anything, but I do like getting my Indian food and my food from other cultures, just so I can enjoy learning that culture, even if it's through the food or some of the other things. So I think that we have an opportunity to celebrate the diversity of our culture if we would just take the time to do it.
Oh, yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I've been really lucky. You know, the two things that I think sometimes breaks barriers is sports and the military. So, you know, when you are formed into a team and a mission, and you have to do it together, all of a sudden, you know, not to say there isn't racism in it, right? Because there's going to be, but you know, you start to look past what somebody looks like, right? So if you are injured and you're bleeding out, are you really gonna say, no, black medic, get away from me because I hate black people? No, that medic, hey, maybe that medics could have, you know, some things that happen in their background, but they are there to help their teammate and the person that's on the line.
Yes.
So there's a way to transcend it. Those just happen to be two areas that I've just historically seen where we get past a lot of differences, and we focus on being a team. You have to be there for each other. It can mean winning, losing, life, death, whatever. You know, I do want to go back to what you mentioned around love and fear. I want to go back to the fear.
I do too. Yes, because fear is what, in my mind, fear is what produces those walls. That's where the bias comes. If you're not afraid, like Jay, I'm not afraid of you, dude. I'll give you a hug, love you to death. You know what I mean? But there may be somebody that, you know, I immediately put that wall up. Like we were talking before, a friend of mine who's a pre-med student, you know, did this paper where what basically our brains automatically categorize things for us, right? There's buckets. That's how we handle all this. You know, this comes in, they put it in the bucket. This comes in, we put it in the bucket. My point is we create those buckets. Right.
That goes back to the unconscious bias. Yeah. I mean, it is. And there are some ways of where those things are wired in our lizard brain, our reptilian brain. That is where all this resides, and it kept us alive.
They're different than me. I don't know. Go away.
Yeah, and that kept us alive, you know, at some point, right?
2,000 years ago.
Right, a long time ago. Unfortunately, that wiring is still there. And so that's where, this big black guy with the tattoo gets out of the truck, comes walking towards me. And all of a sudden, things I've been bombarded with that say this person could be aggressive. This person might have a higher probability of stealing your stuff. Like, where the hell did that come from? Well, that came from getting bombarded by that message somewhere. And I'm sitting here looking at another brother, and I mean, so, there is that shaping. When I think of fear, I think of this. I think of fear of change. And I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. And I'm not going to get political, but, I think people saw change coming. And I think that there are people that saw, oh my goodness, with this change could be a shift in power, a shift in influence.
Yes.
And that scares them.
And I'm afraid.
So I'll give you an example. When I was at Roche, they started a women's initiative because there weren't enough women in leadership positions. And one of my peers was sitting next to me, and we were both sales directors at the time. He was a white guy. And, as they were going through this, we didn't have other diversity programs at Roche at the time, which actually I was going back to that grassroots thing. I was really shocked by, but this was the first overture that they made. And I was like, I'm all in, man. I believe in this. I mean, the group that was telling it was a bunch of white European guys standing on stage. And I just was sitting there thinking, yeah, you think you got a problem? Yeah, you got a problem, right? And there's studies that, women and diversity on these leadership teams make your organization 10 times better. I mean, it is just a fact. So, but what the guy next to me said was, there we go. The freaking day of the white man's gone. This is reverse discrimination. How am I ever going to get promoted? How am I ever going to get that? How am I going to? And we had trust, right? So afterwards, I mean, he was really upset. Afterwards, we talked, and I was like, listen, man, it's not to say that the best person's still not going to win, right? Right. However, look at the playing field. That's bullshit. Okay, look at the playing field. There are no women on it. And so what we're saying is we need a playing field that represents our patients, our people, our society, our culture. And we need to have that on the leadership team so that we can have the innovation, we can have the different viewpoints. Interestingly enough, me and that same individual, we were a part of this marketing program, and there was a product that we were getting ready to launch. And I was in diabetes, which predominantly hits minorities. And there was this product, and they made this jingle. And I was the only black person in the group at that time. And I'm sitting there, and they unveiled this jingle, and I'm like, oh, that's horrible. Our competitors had BB King at the time, right? I mean, and the jingle was just very, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just, and I said, well, who are we trying to target, here? And, they're like, well, here are the percentages of diabetics. I'm like, right, well, you got black individual this is much of the pie, and I'm just going to raise my hand. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to try to represent my people here. That's horrible. That I laugh at that jingle like you're going to get jokes, and I was basically like shushed to the side. Well, sure enough, it was voted one of the worst commercials, and the jingle blew up, and the diabetes community just called it out hardcore. And so I used that as an example to say, we don't have a single black person that is in the marketing group, and we are marketing towards minorities.
Right.
Come on. So, I tried to use that, but he never changed. He stayed angry. He stayed fearful.
Well, that's it, because he was going to lose his piece of the pie, Jay. He was afraid that I'm going to go ahead and say it, okay? And I don't mean to throw any arrows at anyone, but there's the philosophy of either asking for forgiveness or asking for permission. Mm-hmm. Entitled people ask for forgiveness. Those of us that have had to work, I think a lot of times we ask for permission. So the people that I feel, have been entitled, like, I'm going to, you're a white male, leader's white male, you're being grouped, you're now going up the chute, right? So for him, he saw his chute closing down. He wasn't going to automatically get it. I recently worked for a guy, his son, and he came from money, and he had money, and his son was going to college, and he made a comment to me, all he has to do is not mess up. He doesn't have to pay for his college. He doesn't have to fight to get that job. He doesn't have to fight the politics. He doesn't have to make the connections. Just not mess up. So I think there's that whole, so your peer was one of those on the shoot, thinking all I have to do is just not mess up and I'm going to be fine. Well, now he's faced with the thought of, oh my God, I'm going to have to work for this. I'm going to be on the same playing field as everybody else.
Yeah. And we were bringing in some really phenomenal, strong women, brilliant. And, the playing field was changing. It was becoming competitive. And, for me, competitive, that breeds greatness.
That's right.
We don't build innovation when we're stagnant. It's when our backs are against the wall, but I will say, I think, one of the things that I do think about is our own people though, too, I have some folks that talk about, handouts and, things like that. I mean, I think that we also have to police ourselves up a little bit, like on a conversation I was just having before this, one of the things that I struggle with is when I see, walking around the mall, a couple black dudes, pants hanging off the butt, looking just acting foolish. And I think this just perpetuates things. And there was something one of the guys said, I jotted it down, and he said, he's a coach, he's a football coach and a basketball coach, and he said he'll go to them and he'll say, don't be what they expect, be better. And pull your pants up, man. Like, you are going to be judged by how you look, and society is perpetuating this, or the media is perpetuating this, and it's that perpetuation that led to my own unconscious bias, right? So, I think we need somehow great mentors, people that are strong, that speak for us, that, not to get political, but, President Obama, right? I mean, you can disagree or agree with his politics or whatever, but, there's somebody who represents
totally,
and women, it's not going to be all women, right? I mean,
right.
There's women out there, for me personally, like, and Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson don't speak for me.
Got it.
I don't see I see division coming out of that. So I do think there needs to be something, and we're at that point, and I think we're ripe for it, where we need to have really beautiful, strong, women and men voices speaking out and representing change. I don't know who that is. I don't, unfortunately, but they got to be there, and I think programs like this might help.
I think it starts
conversations.
I mean, for all of us, wherever we are, to work with compassion and understand that we're all the same. So it starts on smaller levels. Mm-hmm. I've been just as guilty of not calling people out. My ex-boyfriend was a racist. And, in the beginning, I just kind of was like, that ain't right, because they were just little tiny things. And then after a while, I finally was like, shut the up. I can't, you choose. You're either going to be a racist or you're with me. What's your, Yeah. And he was like, well, I only say it to bother you. And I'm like, now that's screwed up too. So my point is, if I had spoken up as soon as it started, if we all speak up and make sure that people are treated, I want to say fairly, but it's more like compassionately. Like, if we understand, like, Mark, you're a person, I've said this before already on the show, we're the same, we're people, mm-hmm. but we're different, and we can learn from each other. So drop all the crap, drop your fear, right? Because you're the one perpetuating the fear too. Yeah. Right? By putting your wall up, then immediately the other person, whether they recognize it or not, feels it. And then, you know what I mean? And then here we are going down the road. Unless it's somebody that's somewhat awake, like you and your mom, that's like, hey, look at your wall. Isn't that nice? You let me know when that goes down. I'll bring you a pie, or stuff that, I mean, But it's crazy. But I think so. It definitely, I think, does have to start with each one of us speaking up when there's something not right, and then also on the bigger levels, because that's like you were saying before, that's grassroots. But it has to also, people can't be afraid when they're in positions of leadership to speak out for what's right, fair, just, and compassionate. It actually makes you a stronger person, a stronger organization.
Yeah, it'll be a stronger society. I mean, that's kind of the, looking at things, through the positive lens. And that's why I like to go to unconscious bias, because we all have them. And it's an easy place it's an easy place to start. And for me, it's telling stories, sharing stories. Hey, look, that's how we started off, before the written word, right? I mean, like,
exactly right.
There's something about knowing and learning people's stories. Somebody the other day after a session that I did sent me a text and shared their story. And, they're in a very, affluent area and doing very well. So I only know them through that lens, right? But they were talking about how, they grew up in a trailer and, the adversity they faced and things like that. I'm like, how beautiful, my gosh, like, that's your story. Like, and so
awesome.
I think if we just realize that everybody has one, if we get to the root cause, that's what I tell a lot of people, like, why are people, people get upset around taking a knee, and a lot of my friends will say it's disrespectful to you as a veteran, or it's disrespectful to the country. This, and I'll say, well, actually, don't imprint that on me. I fought for their right to do a protest, and it's a peaceful one. So, take it a step further and understand what's the root cause. If you have that emotional intelligence to be able to get past, and maybe you still disagree with it, right? That's fine to disagree with it, but get past it, get to the root cause and say, okay, why are people hurting? Why are people speaking out? Why are people taking to the streets? And I don't condone the violent protests. I think it takes us a step back. But I was at the BLM march, and it was a beautiful thing. And it was all races and people coming together, and everybody was wearing a mask, and they were giving away free masks, and they were giving away free food, and they were giving away bottled water, and they were saying, and they said before we stepped off, don't harass anybody, don't harass the police. If you don't have anything positive to say, like, just ignore. Like, they had rules, right?
That's awesome.
It was, oh man, it was a beautiful thing. I put it on live for a while, and people, just because I wanted people to see, well, this is what it really looks like, and you're not seeing this on the media. What you're seeing is the violence and everything else, right? But if people would get to the root cause and say, why did thousands of people take to the street and walk around downtown Raleigh and all these other cities, and be open-minded about it, then we can start to make change, and we can start to be more positive about it, versus just constantly looking at the negative that we're shown. Unfortunately, we have headwinds of being bombarded by the negative stories. For me personally, it's shutting that dang TV off.
We're trying to do more positive stories here. I should let you know and everything, and we can continue the conversation, because I'm not in a rush, so we can keep it going and everything. But I was going to tell you that here on the IBM.TV network, we do have an Out and About channel. Zach, who you saw pop in earlier and everything, has posted on that channel. So it is an avenue. So the next time you go live, let me know, or let Kimberly know, and I'm sure that we would love to get the Out and About on our platform as well, because we do want to try to encourage more of these positive kind of like thoughts of what's going on, and the real kind of flavor of what's going on. So I just wanted to give you that invitation as one of the IBM.TV producers, to say that if you're out there and you do one of those, let Tish or let me know, and we would love to put that out there so that folks can see the true story of what is going on.
That's great. And I have some people I think that I can connect you with that, I mean, they're just beautiful souls, and they do want to make change, and somebody said the other day in one of the interviews I was in, they said, meet each other as humans.
Yes.
If you meet each other as humans, then that's how we can make progress, right? We're all human. We're all, I've been blessed to be able to have traveled all over the world. I've been blessed to be able to live in a bunch of different countries and societies. And one of the things that I always found is that people just want to get by and live, right? I mean, even in combat, going through villages and things like that. I mean, there were families that just want, was it Maslow's hierarchy? They just want
Yeah.
shelter. They want food.
Yeah.
They want family. They want community. They want, and so, and everywhere I went was the same. I mean, I think we're all originally wired the same, and then we're shaped. But the whole point of my article about my granddad is that we can change that shape. We just have to become aware.
Yeah, we can change the shape, and we can also even encourage other people that are doing these kind of things to do it on all levels. Because as you were talking, I was thinking about even on the small corporate level, because I've been part of some of the grassroots organizations and some of the smaller organizations. So it's not just the big corporations that have some of these stereotypes and some of these blockages as well. Because I can tell you that there are some small organizations that also don't do a good enough job of listening to their workforce, and that they have that elitist kind of view with those that are in the management are kind of like, at the boss level, and it's their way or the highway, and they don't do enough listening of people on the lower level. And that's even in our smaller businesses and our smaller corporations. Unfortunately, it's not just on the big mega level, it's also sometimes on our smaller corporations. So I'm sure that even in some of your work, you've seen some small organizations that you were sitting there going like, I can't believe that you're not listening to this person that's been with you for 20, 30 years, that's had some experience and things of that nature, whereas you have come in from an elite standpoint or an elitist standpoint and things of that nature.
Yeah, where I see, sometimes when I'm working with smaller companies, it's kind of, usually it's where they realize that they want a strong platform and foundation because they expect growth, and they want growth, and so they're thinking about the diversity and they're thinking about their culture from the get go, right? And that's where, I think, Tish, like, what you do, and like those are going to be people that are going to be more open-minded. They're going to bring that employee first and that humanistic culture into their organization, and they're going to succeed. And there are definitely those inflection points that I've seen as I work with the smaller companies or the second stage companies in particular, when they're right on that brink of they're getting ready, they've outgrown the 5 or 6 people that make all the decisions now, and they're getting ready to make that next evolution. And that's kind of a make or break point there for me, at least. And of course, I'm biased, right? I think, hey, now's the time that if you don't have that culture and that inclusion, and you're not in that psychological safety and that diverse group, then your starting gate, it's going to come back on you at some point in some form or fashion.
Yeah, and I think that it can happen even, and this is awful to say, but I know that I've had it even like with, I'm going to go ahead and say it, with Walmart shoppers, right? Somebody the other day said something about Walmart shoppers, and I'm like, and I finally thought for a minute, and I was like, wait a minute, Walmart shoppers, a lot of times you shop at Walmart, because I know I've done it myself, when you don't have a lot of money, right? When you're budget conscious. You're lower on, you mentioned the hierarchy of needs. You're lower on the needs. So when you're down there barely able to pay for diapers and formula or whatever it is you need to buy, are you that concerned that your pants aren't covering up your butt? I mean, just for real, so I mean, to understand, back to your point of trying to understand where somebody's coming from, before automatically throwing them in a bucket, as well as understanding where somebody else's bias might come from. I mean, understanding and having compassion for each other is really where the key is.
That's where I love the guy that, from AAA, right? He didn't have his pants down. He didn't have all that stuff, right? But he came from, he realized it's a maturity, right? I mean, and
evolution,
and so, I think it's just that's where I feel like it's on us to help, not to judge.
Yes, so, very much so.
One thing I'm really active on Facebook. I have so many great friends and stuff on there, and oh my goodness, the debates and the jokes and everything else. But one of the things that has been a little frustrating for me has been I don't know, just the tearing down, and sort of that judging, and I'll start to say, well, you're you're a Facebook warrior. Like, I had some people during the protests in Greensboro were like,
Facebook warrior.
somebody needs to go down there and come around my neighborhood. I got my gun, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, well, so hey, listen, I got my concealed carry. I'm a combat veteran. I'm not I'm not a gun nut, but I enjoy going to the range. It's like hitting golf balls for me, and everything else. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're full of shit. Okay? And you are a keyboard warrior. But again, it goes back to that fear, right? What you're seeing is change. And I'm not talking about the violent protests. I was talking about, the nonviolent BLM when people were taken to the streets. And so I see a lot of that. And I have to admit, it started getting on my nerves. I started calling people out. I started to say, hey, well, then what are you going to do to make change? Volunteer. You've got, experience in business, or you got experience in this particular area. Hey, come to the Shaw Score thing with me, and then also people shut up. And, people just want to stay in their safe place and they want to just talk.
A little bubble.
Yeah, in a bubble. But one of the things that I will say, and again, going with the theme of this, right, is taking it to the positivity, right? One of the things that I love is that, once, things started really kicking off, my phone blew up with friends and people that trusted me. And they were like, something's wrong. I don't know what to do, but I want to do something. And man, I was honored to get those and still get those calls of people that just want to engage. And I mean, it's just my opinion, right? I mean, I could be wrong on some things but I'm going to tell you my thoughts. And what encourages me is that people are willing to listen. So shows like this and some other things that I've been on, I feel like it's our duty to share our story because people are willing to listen. If we don't, then, we have a short memory and there's a short window of time here. But I think if we capitalize on it and we can spread these good seeds, then we can really capitalize on what's happening right now and take another step forward. I think about my daughter, she's 16. I think about that generation. One of the great, beautiful things about that generation is they're tired of this stuff.
They're not in the box.
They are not tolerating this. They get sick of it and they go seek information beyond the mainstream.
Yes.
And they don't like racism and inequality. I can tell you that, for the not again, not a blanket statement. You're going to have people that are coming up in different environments, but it's one of the
You're
things
totally right.
I really encourage it. And that's why I feel like, now in our age and our generation, we are the ones that have the torch in hand. That's right. Let's move it forward for them.
Yeah. But, sometimes I feel like they have the torch, to be honest with you, Jay.
And I mean, there's a whole passing, right? We have, I'll call it the power. So, you're the business owner. I'm the business owner. We have, we know the CEOs, we know the exec, we know the people.
Right.
So we have that, my 16-year-old daughter doesn't. What she has is an ideal and a conviction. And so that's where I think, keep that ideal, keep that conviction and make it so that they can be, their environment can be one of growth.
Well, that's why I say that I feel like sometimes they're carrying the torch. I've learned so much from my son. And I think as a society too, that this Generation Z, like you said, even some of the millennials, they're so well educated. They're on their phone. I was talking to somebody and they were like, they may be on their phone walking into light posts, but they're learning something. So, I mean, they're so educated. And like you said, they're not playing with social convention. They're just not playing that game. And I'm so happy and proud that they're not, because that, like you said, Jay, you and I are the ones with our generation, a little bit younger than us, are the ones with this bias, because we were bombarded with it. We're raised with it. There's still pockets out there that are coming out with it. But at the same time, Generation Z I don't care what color you are. I don't care where you're from. I don't care what kind of house you live in. I don't care what kind of car you drive. What's up, dude? I mean, So if we need to learn from them more, but at the same time, to a certain extent, you were saying before, people are a product of their environment. Well, if they were really a product of our social convention, which goes to show that I think that we are not so much individually have as much bias as society portrays it. It's almost
Yeah.
more of a herd kind of thing.
Yeah.
You get people by themselves and they're like, hey, they drop the walls a lot more than when there's a group.
I think, there's always going to be extremes. And I think about, Ms. Shirley, what you're talking about with the religion, that you're going to have extremists in different religions. Well, I was protected by and worked with and side by side with Jordanian Muslim troops. And, I came back to a very, anti-Muslim rhetoric. And even to this day, or when Obama was president, it popped back up. Oh, he's here to create a Muslim country. And I would try to tell people, like, I fought alongside Muslims and who were fighting for the freedom of their brothers. I've been to countries like Turkey where I was walking around a lost tourist, and people joke, they call me the international brown guy. Anywhere there's brown people, they'll think I'm from there, right? I was stationed in South America, people just start speaking Spanish. When I'm in the Middle East, Arabic and Farsi. But and somebody, they would come up and they would go, they just assumed, I was, and they would go, do you need some help, brother? And and I, having been stationed with Muslims, I knew that that's how they are in the society. Here was a lost, they assumed I was a Muslim. Can I help you, brother? And I was like, yeah, I'm trying to find the blue mosque. And they're like, well, it's that big blue thing, right? Oh, you're American. Oh, God. But there's extremes, right? And so what we're bombarded by are the people strapping bombs and stuff like that. But again, I was a counterintelligence guy. And so part of my job was to think like the enemy, understand the other side. And I had that gift of call it empathy, where I would say, okay, I toured some refugee camps, and you're talking now about multi-generations that are sitting in basically tent cities who are being taught by some radical folks, but and they don't get access to information.
Right.
But most people don't see that. They're just like, oh, those people, they're violent people. It's a violent religion. They strap bombs themselves to kill people. Well, no. It's actually a very welcoming religion. I was welcomed into people's homes. I spent time with Bedouins. I mean, I was fed. I was protected.
Nice.
But that's a unique situation. Not everybody gets to see that. But I do at least try to tell the story so that people understand, oh, well, hey, maybe it's not always people trying to do, these things. But so I think just like, when you look at the Klan, right? It's a Christian organization. Really? No, it's not a Christian organization. It's an extreme. So I think, we have these extremes, and how do we unlock this kind of big middle? And maybe the middle, there are some biases and things like that here, certainly, but there's probably more of a willingness to change and talk and have a dialogue and be open-minded about it. And that's what I would like to see, is not to be so divisive, not focus on the extremes, and focus on people who are willing to, agree to disagree, but at least have an open mind about it.
And share without walls.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great idea. Without walls and everything of that nature. By the way, I was glad to hear that Turkey story. I spent a little bit of time in Turkey as an infant. I have no memories of it, but my dad was actually in the Air Force, so I was born here in Durham, but I think when I was about 3 or 4 months old, Mom grabbed me in the, as a baby and carried me to the Turkey. So between like the 3 or 4 months old till like about 3 years old, I was there living in Turkey. And Dad actually just heard from one of his Turkish friends, so he still keeps in touch with some of the people there. And through social media, he was able to hear from one of them recently. So definitely, the world is a smaller place, and we are able to keep in touch with people through the wonders of the internet and things of that nature. So I know one of his mentors, unfortunately, I think has passed on, but I think it was like one of the relatives of that mentor that he's been in touch with. So definitely was great hearing him say that about Turkey and everything. So just glad to hear a little bit of home stories, but from both Turkey and Rocky Mountain. Like I said, Mom is we had it. I was hearing all kinds of stuff that was connected to my family and everything.
Yeah,
Glad to
yeah.
hear those things are going on. And I'm curious to find out about division and everything, because I remember, as I was thinking about it, when I went to high school, and like I said, that was in the 80s, we actually had three, unfortunately, homecoming queens, because as you know, in Rocky Mountain area, there's a Native American population. So we had
Yep.
the Native American queen, we had the African American queen, and we had the
Wow.
European American queen. I don't know if that is still going on. I've got to find out from my folks over at Warrenton High School, but I also know that they would try to, as much as they could, divide the valedictorian and the salutatorian. So if one came from one part of the society, they would try to get the other one from one of the other parts of society. Now, given there were three components of the society, so somebody usually was going to get left out, because I think in the year I graduated, the valedictorian was European American, and I think the salutatorian might have either been, I don't remember, was she was Native American or African American. I think she was African American, but it was definitely, they were trying to keep those kind of like splits going on. So hopefully, as we've grown as a society, we're seeing less of those splits. And one of the things that I always encourage people to do is, and I agree with everybody, that everything that y'all have said is, definitely we need to have unity as a people, and it's all right to celebrate your culture. Because I mean, I've got
Yes.
relatives that are Native American, and they do a great job of celebrating their culture through powwows and things
I
of that
love
nature.
powwows.
And Vernon travels the country doing
Yeah.
tours of the powwow circuit. So I do think it's all right to celebrate the culture of whatever your culture is, but at the same time, we need to have unity and also respect the other cultures as well. So you can celebrate your culture and also expose it to other people that may not be from that culture. At least that's the way I've always thought that we should do things,
Yeah.
in my mind.
I would agree. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be as an American, right? It's
Yeah.
supposed to be a melting pot. So, I mean, that is the formula for being great. Is, I mean, being able to have the best of the best of all of our different backgrounds, and whether that, in our different cultures and different things that we do. I just, it's one of the reasons why I love, like, going to places where there are different ethnicities. We would seek those places out for our vacations, because we would want, hey, I never had Ethiopian food, so
Yep.
hey, I want to go check out some
Give it a
Ethiopian
shot.
food. And you know what? There's information there. I'm going to learn a little bit of history about
Yep.
Ethiopia, because, when I grew up, Ethiopia was the starving kids. Well, there's actually a lot of beautiful things that come out of Ethiopia, and a huge cultural history there at Crossroads. And so, it's just one of those things that can make us a blend of all that's the best. And that's just what we can strive for.
Definitely. So I think we've had another long conversation, and I love to think going with Tish. And Tish is just such an amazing host and an amazing woman altogether. So, like I said, we could probably go for 2 or 3 hours, but I probably got to do the official thing and wrap us all up.
Yeah.
So I know you probably got other things to do during the course of your day. So I'll put on my producer hat and get ready to wrap everything up and get ready to close out with the show and things of that nature. Tish, who do we have next week? I hate to tell you this, but unfortunately, I did not line up your favorite song on this particular episode, so we will not have this song this time, but we will have the ambassador close out everything and the plane that they give us and everything. So we'll have that to line up the end of the show. But who do you have as a guest for us next week? Because I know you always got amazing people. I'm still waiting to connect with all these folks that you have introduced me to in real life. So I will be getting in touch with you as well, Mr. Graves. So you know that I will be
that'd be great. That sounds good. I was going to ask for your information as well.
So next week we have Claudia Ricard, who is the English hypnotist. She's a therapist and a hypnotist. So she is amazing the way she actually rewires the brain. So I've actually, she was a Tai Chi student of mine, and then I went to her I got triggered by some things and went to see her, and so I know by experience what that does and what it can do for people. So it's amazing. It'll be great. And she's so much fun too. She's gorgeous and adorable, and it'll be It'll be fun. It'll be and educational.
All the things I'm not.
And everything like that. I was already getting a little worried because Tish said she was a hypnotist, and I'm going through my mind like, I don't want to be hypnotized through the screen.
Yeah, you're gonna have to cover the screen.
You want to be hypnotized by her.
I'm willing to try anything.
Hey, you Tish, will want it.
I do have. She might be watching. I don't know, but I have just a beautiful soul that I went to high school with, Becca Rue, who just an amazing story. She does mindfulness and wellness, and
nice.
She just packed up, I think, about a year ago, and decided her dream was to live in the Virgin Islands. She did everything she needed to do as a mom, and she packed up and went there and started her business. So I definitely want to connect with you guys because, she's definitely one of those spread the positive energy around the world types of people. So
she'd probably be great for dropping your chains, right? At least because for her to, and she handled everything completely. And then so people, it's not too late. If something sparks your soul, do it.
Do it. So, yeah. So I'll definitely be connecting you guys.
That'd be great.
Afterwards. So, just again, I'm really honored. Thank you guys for having me on. I had a lot of fun. I see that we've been going for an hour and 50 minutes.
It's almost 2 hours.
We've been going for a while. It's a great conversation. Like I said, we probably could have done this for another hour and a half, 2 hours. I tell you, these shows on IBM.TV, they can last that way because the show that I did with the minister, that actually went for 3 hours. And it was
wow.
Wow.
I think it went for about 3.5 actually. So it went for 3.5, and it was a woman who had been through abuse and other kinds of things. So Mindy Dougherty was sharing her stories, and the minister came on. A number of other folks came on, and then I was like, wait a minute, we've been talking for a while. So these conversations can be amazing and very thought-provoking. That's part of what we try to do here at IBM.TV. So we hope that you will be a regular viewer. We hope that you'll pop back in definitely on Tish's show, but we hope that you'll catch some of our other shows as well. Like, right before Tish with Zach's funk music, Funk from the Front Seat. So he had that going on. He's also got funk music with Zach tomorrow. And we've got a number of other great shows that happen. We've got the Mind Closet, which actually is out of Nigeria, and they come from like a spiritual standpoint as well. So that's one of our shows. I do a number of shows, including the online dinner party on Wednesday evenings and the radio show with Mark Lee on Monday afternoon. So definitely those are some of the programs that exist here. And we've got programs around chess and a number of other things. So we've got all kinds of great programming here on IBM.TV. I know that some of my past guests have popped in on the YouTube site and just gone through just watching stuff endlessly because there's so much good content there. So we hope that you will do the same. And right now, we're going to wrap everything up because we're going to bring the ambassador on this time. I will have Tish's music queued up as regular next time, but this time we're going to close it out with the ambassador, which is Ankith's daughter, and she gives us the whole salutes about what to do during this virus time and how to handle things with the washings of the hands and things of that nature. And then we'll close out with the plane that talks about some of the things and some of our people that are involved with this lovely network. So, but right now we'll start off with the ambassador and what she's got to say about how we should treat ourselves from a health standpoint.
हैंड होकर और ऐसे अपने खांसी जब आएगी तो ऐसे करेंगे अच्छू अच्छू और कोरोना वायरस को धन्यवाद हमारा म्यूजिक सुनने का.
Like I said, that's one of our producers. That's his daughter, and she does a great job of giving us hints as to how to handle things from a health standpoint and things of that nature. And now we're going to close out with our things to talk a little bit about the network itself, and that will wrap up this show.